Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show to about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Barry Season 1 finale. A great season finale, a great episode in general. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, I was so curious what Barry was going to do as the end result. So he shows up at Fuchs' place, doesn't say anything to him, gets his money. He's like, I'm done, I'm out, leave me alone. And punches Fuchs in the face, and Fuchs like, oh, you can't just like punch me in the face. He punches him again and then leaves. He was like, I'm not going to do this anymore starting now. Because he blames Fuchs. It's like, everything all the bad stuff I've ever done is because of you. You're the one that convinced me to do it, that I was kind of doing some form of a right thing because I was killing bad people. But once again, I brought it up last episode. You could trail everything back to being technically Fuchs' fault, because Fuchs is the one who jump-started Barry and all of this. Even, like, when they were away from the whole Goran situation of having to do the whole Cristobal situation, without Barry having to kill him, like, that hit was going to get called off, but Fuchs, being the opportunist he is, saw an opportunity to make a lot of money, and being good with them and continue getting a lot more and more work, so he jumped at the opportunity, and it's like, right, this all comes down to you. And what does Fuchs decides to do? He decides to betray Barry and goes to Goran. It's like, right, you need to go to Barry. Like, what were you going to do? Were you going to tell them? It's like, oh, I'll give you Barry. Were you going to hope, like, oh, they get Barry? And, like, he never expressly said what he was going to do. I guess he even says it. Barry betrayed me, so I'm betraying Barry. So were you hoping, like, right, I'm going to give Barry to you. He's all yours just so that we're good, so that you can kill him and it's all square? Or is it meant to be a situation of you're like, nah, he's yours to use, and he's such a great assassin, you force him to work for you, he's all yours? I'm assuming it was the former, but maybe Fuchs could have thought about the latter, which is so, I think also just proves, like, how he views Barry. Like, if he really cared about Barry as, like, the family member he claims to have cared about him, like, then he wouldn't have put him in this situation in the first place, so... But it doesn't work out for Fuchs. It's like, cool, we already know where Barry is. We don't need your help. We know about the acting class because Vosh was already following him around, and we found out about the acting class through him. Granted, he kind of screwed me over because he ended up getting himself killed by a cop, and it also gets cops all up in my business even more so. So, Fuchs, we're going to have to kill you. In fact, Home Dude's twin brother is here to do it too. I'm like, okay, so that's 3 siblings in this whole situation that are all tied up to Goran and the Chechens, so I thought that was interesting. So it's like, right, he's going to cut you in a little bit. So I was like, wow, is this how Fuchs' story ends? Well, just because of the sad situation of the Stephen Root element of it all. So I wasn't sure where that correlated storyline-wise to real-world-wise, so that's why I didn't know what to make of, like, what Fuchs' story was going, because I didn't remember. I want to say that was in 2020, Stephen Root, so, like, that's why I'm like, that might even been 2019, I don't remember. It might be after this, so that's probably, like, he was already kind of exiting the story, so that probably might not necessarily impact the, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens in Season 2 to really get an understanding and grasp on whether they touch on that or not. But that's why I was wondering, like, oh, is this technically his exit from the show anyway? So I was like, oh, he's dead. But it's like, no, Goran comes back later on. He's still intact. I was like, oh, I was like, wow, that sucks that, like, Fuchs got it super hard dismembered like that. And it's like, oh, no, he's okay, because Home Dude is all about the theatrics. That ends up being their biggest issue, is all these theatrics and stuff. To be fair, Cristobal said that he really appreciated the whole, like, oh, yeah, you mailing me the bully? He's like, yeah, I like this guy. So... But to be fair, that's also, well, it was Goran who did the whole, like, theatrics of it all, but it's like, right, we're going to do all that, and he wants to, like, oh, it's part of the torture, and I want to terrify him a little bit, but Goran's like, kill him. And it's like, well, he's like, I'm sorry about being a dick about it, but this is what my brother would want, and stuff like that, and Goran was like, fine, I'm going to kill him. because Hank was removed from the situation because it's like, right, do you love Barry or something? He's like, what? It's like, Barry, well, your lipstick camera led to all of this stuff. Barry shot at you, but you forgave Barry. You always like making excuses like, do you love it? He's like, no, I'm loyal to you, Goran. But every time he turns around, it's like, you're always in Barry's corner. He even calls Barry up and is like, right, you probably should leave town because they're probably going to come after you. Because he's even the one suggested, like, right, Barry wasn't going to be at the acting class because he's like, right, he is going to assume that we still think he's dead and he's not going to go back there. So he's probably going to leave. And he was right. But the moment he got the call from, I even love Hank being like, hey, thank you for the friendship. Barry was like, what friendship? You guys have had a few conversations here and there, but whatever it is, Hank really latched on to Barry. But maybe it's because of his whole dynamic with Goran and everything that he always is kind of, because he's also got that very, he's kind of got that weird, innocent and pure element to him that he is so polite, as the episode kind of keeps bringing up. But Barry showed up and saved Fuchs. That was pretty, like, the moment the gunshot happened, I was like, oh, somebody, like, Barry came to save you. That was wild. Like, the whole Goran standing there, blasted hole in the other side of his head. And the fact is that his body, like, went out of control. He was swinging his arm up and down. I was like, oh my God, is he going to accidentally shoot someone in the process? But then him just, like, sitting down, I was like, that was brutal. And then Barry proceeded to kill everyone else. Saves Fuchs, getting him out of there. By the time the police show up, because they ended up getting a warrant for Goran's place, everyone's already dead. And I love that. I was curious how Hank was going to react. And Hank sees everyone dead. He's like, Goran? He's like, Barry, and smiles. And is like, wait, the police are coming. That's most likely for us. That's not good. Come on, fellas. So I don't know how they handle that, whether they immediately left out. I'm assuming they just, like, took the guns and left before the police arrived. So it's like, cool. So how do we know the Bolivians did this? It's like, oh, whoever shot from outside of the window was either crouched or short. And they're like, Bolivians. So it's an open and shut there. I'm like, I love how everything just kind of falls into place and works out in that regard. So Barry tells Fuchs to leave and go because he doesn't want to be this person anymore who Fuchs made him be. Like, I might be this killer and everything, but I'm only this way because you made me that way. And Fuchs is like, come on, well, you know, Barry's like, take all the money and just go. But Fuchs is like, come on, Barry. And might be the last time they see each other, but it's like, right. Barry's like, I've done enough to pay you back for what you've helped me do, but also the monster you made me. I saved your life. Go. I could have just left you to die. So Barry's staying. Everything's kind of resolved. I love that the chief or commissioner, whoever he is, that's talking to the reporters, compares this whole situation. He compares it to like a cross. What was it, between a Western and Yojimbo? And one of the people in the reporter was like, "How do you spell Yojimbo?" He's like, "You spell it like how it's pronounced." I was wondering whether or not one of the questions was going to be related to that. It was. I'm not well versed in Yojimbo. I know a little bit about Yojimbo, but my own experience mainly with Yojimbo is Final Fantasy X. Tangents and all that aside. So, cool, it seems like the Bolivians and the Chechens had their whole thing, and now it connects Ryan to Taylor, and that's what led to this whole thing going down. So, Barry's super in the clear. I love that Jean ends up calling Janice while she's on TV, and he's like, oh, you still owe me a kick in the balls and whatnot. So I was like, hey, now that the investigation over, which answers the question, like, now that it's over, it's not too inappropriate for you guys to get together. So Barry showed up to be like, hey, I'm going to drop out of the acting class. He's just like not sure if it's him anymore, because also the process he needed to get there, that darkness, he doesn't want to rely on that anymore. He can't really go there. I also love the entire time him and Sally are having this very heart-to-heart conversation. You can see the bartender in the background like ripping like Ryan's photo off the wall, and it's like, oh, I wonder, does Barry even know? I mean, the thing is, Barry's not too attached to Ryan. I mean, Ryan kind of inspired him to be the actor he is, but it's like, right, I had a few conversations with Ryan. I never got super attached to him. Poor bastard ended up dying, and to be fair, Barry was in the process of about to kill him anyway, so. But Sally's the one that convinced Barry, like, no, keep doing this, because what you did yesterday, that was raw, that was real, you were an actor. She's like, I know what it's like to go from a dark place, and she references, like, she's like, yeah, I don't tell many people this. Well, except for, she's like, Eric, and maybe Jermaine, and I think she might even said Sasha and Natalie, maybe, but the person, the pain she goes through is from a divorce. She was like, right, my ex was a piece of work and it just wasn't a good thing, but she uses that pain because obviously it's cheaper than therapy, is to use that as a way of kind of dealing with things, you know, taking your pain and trying to do something constructive with it. And so she's like, cool. So if you ever want to, you can open up to me about your process. I was like, oh, that's probably not going to be a thing. And he's like, oh, okay, thank you. She's like, okay, I told you about my marriage and my marriage and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, yes, you did. And she's like, okay, it's a process. I was like, oh, so she was literally what I thought she'd be even more upset. Like, no, so you have to tell me. I thought that was going to be a bigger thing than it was. But she's like, no, let's work on this play together. And I love the way the episode's constructed, because at that moment, it's like maybe like I think it was the 19-minute mark. I was like, wow, there is still quite a few minutes left in this episode. We're like a little less than halfway through we got like a little less than half the episode left. So I'm like, where's the rest of this episode going to take us? So we skip to some time later. Barry and her are good. Then also hanging around Gene, who's got Janice over. So it's been enough time that the relationships across both relationships have developed, and they're spending time together, and it's really sweet. And I figured things were going to take a turn the moment it's like, I thought Barry Block, I thought it's like, oh yeah, Barry Block, that's my actor name. And it's like, oh, okay. And the moment that came up, I was like, oh boy. Oh, because she tried looking up Barry on Facebook in a previous episode, but she went by his real last name. His Facebook name is based around the fake name that Ryan gave him. So I was like, that's going to be interesting. I thought Janice was going to latch onto that immediately, but she probably put it in the back of her mind. She was probably, she was already suspicious from Barry for a while, the moment she heard about the 2 dead Marines, and when she initially thought Barry was one of them. She kind of already felt that connection. She's like, oh, here's 2 Marines, and I just happen to know a Marine connected to the same acting class that Ryan was a part of, so she was already suspicious of Barry, and I think all of this kind of lit something there. Maybe spending enough time with Barry over whatever amount of time passed, she was already getting those inklings and those feelings. And then the moment it gets brought up about, oh yeah, and Gene references the monologue, and Barry's just like, I don't remember what you're talking about. He's like, oh, come on, you gave that monologue. And Janice is like, oh, really? And she's like, I only have one question. And then she asks, Sally about the ride-along. You could tell Barry's like super uncomfortable. You're like, oh boy, it's about to get wild. And the moment Sally's sneaking away, you're like, no, don't look too deep in this, Sally. Janice, don't. And she does. And I love that she thinks back to like, right, the moment you realize it's someone you recognize. If it's someone you know, you'll eventually recognize it. And it's like, right, she now recognizes it was Barry because she spent enough time around him now to realize it was him. So Barry explains everything like, right, he did some bad things, but that's not who he is anymore. We both want to do the right thing. We're trying to both do the right thing. We want to move on in our lives, so that's good. So let's just forget about this. The same situation, it's the exact same situation with Chris. Like, we can walk away from this. But Janice didn't want to because she's a cop, and it's like, right, you're a fucking murderer. I can't just let you go. And it's like, please, Janice, let's not do this. And especially when he's walking by the tree and he's got a gun there, he was waiting for this. Like, I guess he followed her out and knew that based on the conversation at dinner, he knew like this was going to go sideways. So either he keeps one on him just in case, or what. But he knew like something was going to go down. So he ends up putting Janice down, taking a shower, laying back in bed with Sally, and he's like, starting now is when he's going to not be that person anymore. And I think that's going to be the thing of like, yeah, you're going to constantly be moving that goalpost time and time again. I'm like, no, I'm going to be a good person and leave behind all my killing starting now. Okay, starting now. He's done it multiple times. It was the 3rd time he did it this episode. So it's sad because even before Barry tried to be like, right, if you do this, Jean is going to be heartbroken. She's like, I can't think about that right now. He's already done this once, killing someone that was innocent. Chris is someone he dragged into all of this. Barry didn't do a good enough job. To be fair, everything just funny enough, fell into place and led everything and everyone away from him as a suspect. But ultimately, it all, like, despite all that, it all came crumbling down anyway. I like that because every time you turn around, I was like, oh man, Barry's getting away with this. I had made a reference to, like, Ozark earlier in the season about how, like, oh man, like, how everything that could go wrong potentially can, but then all of a sudden, miraculously, the Bird family comes out of it okay. You're like, oh, all right, that's pretty dope. Without, there's always going to be some issues in the aftermath of it, just like this, because it's like, yeah, it seemed like Barry was going to get away with everything, and then it just took one stumble to, like, cause the dominoes to come falling in his direction. So now it's like, right, Gene's going to assume that Janice left and can't get in contact with her, which is going to... Because not only did Barry kill someone, killing Chris, he already had a guilty conscience about. Killing Janice, he's going to have a double guilty conscience. Because one, she was a cop just doing the right thing. Two, that's Gene's girlfriend, so you're going to break his heart in the process. Now there's also the thing of, cool, as an actor, it gives you more fuel and ammunition to use to spark your acting, but also it's just the sad thing of, like, right, you're going to have to lie to Gene and see the heartbreak and the wonderment about where Janice went, especially because, once again, she is a cop, so questions are going to pop up about, like, cool, because he also now doesn't have Fuchs around to, like, back him up and help him with that whole system of things. I mean, granted, who knows how much... We know Fuchs could help with the alibi situation because of the phones and identities, but beyond that, we don't know what else Fuchs could have helped, even in a situation like this. There is a situation of... Now, Hank is kind of in charge of the Chechens now that Goran's gone. And so him and Cristobal are getting along. So it's like, cool. And Cristobal being like, oh, you're so nice. And then Hank is like, yeah, guys mingle and get to know each other. Like, this is going to be a beautiful working relationship going forward. So Barry's probably not completely done with them, and now it's going to be a thing. I mean, funny enough, he's killed people on both sides. He's caused some issues with the Bolivians. He's caused issues with the Chechens. But Hank has a very soft spot for Barry, so... Maybe they could end up helping with this. He probably still wants to stay up. If he gets help from them next season, it's going to drag him deeper into all of this, and it's just going to be him spiraling down a rabbit hole with everything. So it's kind of a sad way to end this season, but I'm excited to see where the next season ends up taking us with all of this. Yeah, the nature of the show looking up. I think if you look on Wikipedia, one of the titlings for this is like tragic comedy or something like that. And you're like, yeah, there's a lot of tragedy and drama to this. It isn't just all like dark humor. It's like a little bit of dark humor, but there's some like drama and tragedy elements to this. And it's just like, yikes. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going into the next episode, which is the next season. So I'm excited to see what happens over the course of season 2. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.